Sydney Seiler. He's Korea Chair, Senior Advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. He was also National Intelligence Officer for North Korea at the National Intelligence Council. Sydney, thank you very much for joining us, at short notice. So here's what we know. Yoon has lifted martial law and the military has left, Parliament grounds. Meaning that his high-stakes gamble appears to have failed. So the question is, what happens now? Is it really down to two options? He resigns or he gets impeached?
This has been a strange set of events from the beginning. I had a sense that it was not your standard declaration of martial law, that President Yoon probably did not intend to use military force, unlike the coups d'etats of the past. And that, as a experienced prosecutor lawyer, he had some basic understandings of the constitutional parameters within which he wanted to try to implement martial law and accomplish what he otherwise can't do in terms of dismissing the National Assembly, like you might see in a parliamentary system where you can call for dissolution and a vote. This was a political gamble that, again, he probably was willing to accept the risk because at this point, he had already been very weakened, as mentioned earlier. His legislative agenda was just stalling in the National Assembly. There was just impeachment after impeachment directed against him, charges directed against his wife, against other ruling party members. So this was a deadlock and a big gamble to try to break through it. My sense is, given what you mentioned about the large number of people, both sides of the aisle voted to have the martial law overturned, is he's going to find few political allies after this, and impeachment is likely a path that the country is moving down.
Okay, so it almost seems like this was a desperate attempt to do something, and you said that he was willing to accept the risk. What's next as well for the country? Is it in for a period of political instability, or do you think that this whole incident lasting just about 6 hours, could they be able to just kind of walk out of this situation kind of unscathed?
I think the overall situation will be stable. We went through an impeachment and replacement of a president under Park Geun-hye back in the 2017 time period. The system survived the transition. There was a interim leader while preparations for an election were held. An election was held and Moon Jae-in became president. And during that period, first of all, the concern of the U.S. strength of the U.S.-Korea alliance, deterrence of North Korea, we had no problems with any of that. And things relatively stabilized. Even the stock market's relatively stabilized. The longer these demonstrations that you see in the background drag out, the worse it is. But this, again, if you've been following Korean politics for any amount of time, you know that we go through these periods, and democracy and the rule of law always prevail. And so I'm somewhat confident that there'll be a transition period, but Korea's democratic pillars, foundations will not be significantly shaken by these events.
Sydney, the country's constitution allows for the president to declare martial law under national emergency situations to maintain peace and order. Reports suggest that current conditions, don't meet any of these situations. I want to ask you about those suspicions, though, that law enforcement, the military, was actually at the National Assembly in an attempt to block the vote. How serious is that allegation in the overall scheme of things?
Well, that would be really hard to prove. You could say that President Yoon is smart. He wouldn't have done this unless he had confidence that he could block the vote. On the other hand, President Yoon, again, probably looked at, what are the odds I could do this or not? And he went for it anyway. In any case, the national security allegations that originally justified the declaration of martial law are all somewhat subjective to a degree in terms of, allegations that there were large number of pro-North Korean sympathizers anti-state elements throughout the National Assembly who were trying to deliberately weaken South Korea, who were essentially enemies of the state. You know, this has been a long claim of conservatives that the political left, the progressives in South Korea, are overly influenced by North Korea. Yoon probably thought he had a sufficient conservative backing for these allegations, that his allegations would galvanize support. It ended up, at the end of the day, he just didn't have the time for that to unfold.
Yeah, and Sydney, whether, you know, this latest incident has wider ramifications beyond the country, I think, first of all, whether it could embolden the North, what could Pyongyang do during this period of instability in the South, and also what it means for a key ally, the US, whether it can still depend on South Korea.
So somewhat, you know, contrary to what one might otherwise conclude, North Korea tends to remain calm and quiet in a wait and see mode during periods of political turmoil in the South, in part because I think what they don't want to be seen as doing is taking advantage of the situation and proving to be the threat to South Korean security that President Yoon opened by saying that they were. So my sense is, you know, North Korea is going to watch these events. You know, obviously there'll be rhetoric, there'll be support for those people who support the removal of President Yoon. But I think North Korea otherwise, you know, we'll be on a close alert to look for any unusual movements by North Korea. But they may just simply portray this as another example of the illegitimacy of the leadership of South Korea, and the reason why they earlier this year said we're not going to pursue good relations with these South Koreans anymore. Anyway, I think, you know, in terms of the strength of the U.S. ROK alliance. You know, again, this is a 70-year-old alliance since the end of the Korean War. It's an alliance that's observed and made it through a number of coups d'états, other political upheaval. I mentioned the removal of President Park Geun-hye several years ago, and because of the strong ties between the U.S. and South Korea, the institutionalization of our relationships, and that these types of international relations, these types of close relations, alliances, partnerships, go far beyond merely the leaders or you know, the political parties as they come and go. So I don't think the U.S. ROK alliance will be significantly impacted by these events.
Understood. Sydney, we have to leave it there. Grateful that you have found the time to speak to us this morning. Sydney Seiler is Korea Chair, Senior Advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies.